Well, this is different. It is after 10 o'clock Tuesday evening. I am not in my room. It is raining outside. The freezer behind me just kicked on. Welcome to what will be unquestionably the worst episode of our season. What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Still fueled by our great friends at Nerd Tees. At least that hasn't changed. And welcome to, God, what week is this even? Week 16 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2019 CFL regular season. And we are way out of our element because I got a busy day ahead of me tomorrow. I wouldn't have time to get the episode to you until probably 9 o'clock tomorrow night. I'm not willing to do that. This episode's going to be out on time, damn it. First though, week 15, very successful around these parts, 3-1 straight up and 3-1 against the spread. Even went even money on the totals, which we feel pretty darn good about with the season that we've had. So that has us 41-16 straight up. That is +5 to what I was straight up to this point last season. It has us 36-20-1 against the spread. That is +7 to where I was to this point last season. And we're even catching up on the totals, on the over-unders. 8-4 overall in week 15, 104-66-1 this season across all CFL picks, 60.82% in the CFL this season, which I'm very happy about. And to last season, 10 correct picks up from where we were at this point last year. That represents an increase of 5.85% overall from last season to this season. A couple teams in the real life CFL having themselves a heck of a year have already punched their ticket to the CFL postseason. Those being the Hamilton Tiger Cats, now at 10-3 on the season, and Winnipeg and Calgary, who are both at 9-4 in the West. Those three teams are locked in. They're making the playoffs one way or the other. In the official Atlantic Schooners CFL Fantasy Football League, I'm continuing to climb up the rankings, although it's a slow climb, and I'm kind of running out of real estate at the end of the line. Up to 29th now out of 70 people that are in that league. 108.4 points brought in week 15, a second straight successful week, heavily stacking the BC Lions playing against Ottawa. That has me at exactly 1,225 points overall on the season. Again, we're a little better than halfway now, but just in terms of the rankings, I mean, but like we only got a precious few weeks left, so we really got to pull in some magic to move up. My Week 15 MVP, without a doubt, Brian Burnham, wide receiver for the BC Lions. 9 catches, $135 and a score in that curb stomping against Ottawa last week. Brought me in 28.5 fantasy points. He's my MVP. And if you like stacking players in fantasy, you're going to love my fantasy lineup this week. My Week 16 CFL Fantasy Football lineup is right in front of your eyes right now, and we are not only stacking Saskatchewan Roughriders, we are super stacking Saskatchewan Roughriders this week. Cody Fajardo in at quarterback, we got William Powell, we got Naaman Roosevelt, and we've got Manny Arsenault. So we're going 4 skill players for the Saskatchewan Roughriders this week, playing in Toronto. Obviously, I'm heavily on Sasky in that game to put up a lot of points, complementing those players with CJ Gable, who I think should have plenty of room to run against Ottawa, and Jalen Acklin, who has been a pretty darn steady presence for the Hamilton Ticats over the last 3 to 4 weeks. A nice safety blanket there for Dane Evans. Once again, we're rocking no defense. I think it's going to be a high-scoring week, and the defenses that I was interested in taking a look at, the price was just too high for this week. That is my CFL fantasy lineup in Week 16. Calgary Stampeders on the bye this week, so our lineup of games in Week 16 looks like this. The Hamilton Ticats are going to travel to Winnipeg to take on the Blue Bombers in a game that most people, I think, are calling a Grey Cup preview. You got the Eskimos in Ottawa taking on the REDBLACKS. Saskatchewan is in Toronto taking on the Argos, as we mentioned. And the Montreal Alouettes are in BC to take on the Lions. Huge storyline in that game, and that's who's going to be under center for Montreal. But we will start with what is likely the game of the week, and that is in Winnipeg. Hamilton Ticats traveling to Winnipeg to take on the Bombers. Hamilton were winners last week. They've won 3 of their last 4. A 3-point victory in Edmonton against the Eskimos for the Ticats last week. But they held a 24-7 lead at halftime in that football game, which absolutely evaporated. It was a tie game coming down to the last few seconds, and Lyram Hiralahu, as he has done already this season and has certainly done in seasons past, he ices the game, 34-yard field goal as time expires. Hamilton comes away with a road victory, an all-important road victory as well. It's basically what clinched them that playoff spot. But it's still a running back alphabet soup for the Hamilton Ticats. It's so weird watching the way that they deploy the game on the ground. Braylon Addison carried the ball 4 times in that game. Jackson Bennett carried it 6 times. Anthony Coombs had 3 carries. Dave Watford, the backup quarterback, had 3 carries. Evans had 3 carries, a quarterback, and Brandon Banks even had a carry in this game. So again, we've talked about it for the last couple of weeks. No truly identified RB1. Although it's funny, I mentioned Braylon Addison, and I kind of mentioned him specifically. I kind of feel like maybe Brandon Banks is not the best wide receiver on this team anymore. Through the course of this season, it feels to me like Braylon Addison has kind of taken that role away from him. Look, here's the last 3 games. And I realize it's a small sample size, but here's the last 3 games. Brandon Banks has touched the ball 29 times all-purpose. That's fine, about 10 touches a game. 286 total yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Nothing wrong with that. Obviously pricey if you're taking him in fantasy, but nothing wrong with those numbers. Braylon Addison has touched the ball 36 times. That's about 12 touches a game. 492 total yards between receiving yards and rushing yards for Braylon Addison, and 3 receiving touchdowns. It feels to me like Braylon Addison is the number 1 on this team now, no longer Speedy B. The Blue Bombers come into this game losers from last week. They've only won 2 of their last 4, so they're kind of even money. They're still outscoring opponents by about an average of a touchdown, so their wins have been absolute blowouts. But they dropped a 38-37 game, a 38-37 decision in Montreal last week, a game that they were absolutely in control of, and they coughed up 21 fourth-quarter points to lose that football game. And the offense in the second half absolutely went to sleep because I think Winnipeg was up 34-17 at halftime. They basically, it's like they stood at their own door and opened it and said, "Here you go, Montreal, please rob me." Chris Strevler was hyper efficient at quarterback, 86.4% passing, and he had a hat trick, a trio of rushing touchdowns in this game. So it's not like he didn't put points on the board, but that Montreal comeback really started with a late second quarter interception that Vernon Adams turned into 7 points. That's what really turned the tide of this football game. Winnipeg was going to go into the half leading the game 34-10. They went into the half leading the game 34-17, but the comeback was on. That's where Montreal thought, oh, we could actually get back into this game. Andrew Harris made his return for the Bombers, and in his return, all he did was touch the ball 17 times, turn it into 188 total yards. But the story of this game for the Bombers is I don't think that team, as good as that team is, had any excuse to win time of possession, but allow 528 total yards, 38 points, and lose. There was no excuse for the Bombers to have that happen to them or allow that to happen to themselves. That team is too good. Is this really the favorite in the West? It's funny, right now, based on the performance from last week, these are 2 such similar football teams in that neither one of them appeared interested in winning that game in the second half last week. Somebody's got to win, obviously. This is also back-to-back-to-back road games for Hamilton, and that is a really, really tough road to hold. Based on that, I'm actually going to take the Bombers to win this game. I like Winnipeg at home. A lot of that has to do with the fact that they still have not lost a game on their home field yet this year. They're a perfect 6-0 at home. I think they keep that rolling. I'm going to take Winnipeg here at home to pick up the win over the Ticats. Against the spread, Winnipeg is -4.5, which seems like maybe a decent spot to hedge. It's a small hedge, but it might not be the worst idea. I am still going to, though, lean on Winnipeg. I am going to take those points, lay the points, go Winnipeg -4.5. In addition to the Bombers being a perfect 6-0 at home, they're also 5-1 at home against the spread. And Hamilton has only been a road dog twice this season, and they only covered one of those two numbers. Total in the game set at 48 points. I've got it capped at a low 50. It's enough for me to say go over on it. We're going to see some points in this game. I hope we're going to see one of the most exciting games that we've seen all season. Let's go over 48 points in Winnipeg Hamilton. As a side note, I am so sorry for the way this sounds. It must sound absolutely terrible on camera. It will kick off eventually, and that'll make things at least a little bit better. But for now, I'm kind of out of options here, guys. And wouldn't you know who won the pony? All right, can't waste this time. Let's go to Ottawa now. Edmonton traveling to Ottawa to take on the REDBLACKS. Both of these teams are on very long losing streaks. Edmonton has lost 4 games in a row. Ottawa has lost 6 games in a row. And in both cases, these two teams are being outscored by double-digit points on average. Edmonton's being outscored 31-20 during their last 4 games. And in their last 4 games, Ottawa's being outscored by 27 points. Ooh! Edmonton dropping that aforementioned 3-point decision against Hamilton at home last week. And look, 27 points is enough to win a football game in the CFL. 27 points should be enough, especially with a team that you think of like Edmonton. They got a pretty good defense. You think that would be enough to win a game, but you need defense in order to win. Logan Kilgore, as expected, playing in relief of Trevor Harris. Kind of a Jekyll and Hyde at the quarterback position. He did have 3 total touchdowns, one of them coming on the ground, but he also had a hat trick of interceptions on barely 60% passing. But another way to judge a quarterback's metrics is what kind of relationship does he have with his best receivers, and clearly this one needs a little more work. Greg Ellingson and Tavares Daniels. Now look, they both had touchdowns in that game, so ultimately both of them put points on the board. But they combined for just 5 receptions on 18 targets. That's not good. That's very bad, in fact. That's maybe 30%? Actually, I don't even think it's quite 30%. These guys need more time working together. And look, the bottom line is the Eskimos allowed 417 yards of total offense. It is difficult to win football games, even in the CFL where the scoring tends to be a bit higher. It's difficult to win football games when you're giving up that enormous chunk of yardage across a game. And Edmonton on the defensive side didn't do enough to win. Speaking of didn't do enough to win, let's talk about a team that hasn't done enough to win in almost 2 months. That is the Ottawa REDBLACKS. 0-4, obviously, in their last 4 games. 6-game losing streak overall, being outscored 39-12. They dropped a 40-7 decision against BC in their own building just last week. And if there is such a thing as tank for blank, you know how in the NFL now they're talking about suck for luck or tank for Tua or, just tanking in order to get the best possible player in the draft. If that concept exists in the CFL, that must be what Ottawa's doing. Jonathan Jennings gets yanked from this game yet again. He got yanked when the score was 30-5, so a hell of a performance from him. Will Arndt comes into the game, had a higher completion percentage at 54.5. It was above Jennings' 47.1, but both of them threw an interception. What I'm saying here is neither is a great option, but Will Arndt has entered 3 of the last 4 games for the REDBLACKS. If Will Arndt doesn't start this week, why is he on the team? And on a team where virtually no one is acting like they give a damn, there is one player on the offensive side for Ottawa that I would say does give a damn, and that's RJ Harris. He's probably the only interested REDBLACK at this point. In those 2 games against BC, he had 7 catches, put up a $111 receiving. He was probably the only REDBLACKS player that had 2 back-to-back solid performances. Okay, folks, it's time for Cooking with Bridgewater's Finest. Now, this is my surefire recipe for getting your team back on track. Step 1, play against Ottawa. There is no step 2. Obviously, on the Eskimos here, let's take Edmonton in Ottawa to hang another loss, yet another straight loss, on the Ottawa REDBLACKS, who have just completely cratered and fallen down to earth. Now, there is no line in this game, mostly because who the hell knows who's going to be playing quarterback for Ottawa. So there's no spread and there's no total. Here's what I'm going to do. Obviously, as I've done all season, if we have a situation where there's no line, I'm going to update that in the comments section below once we do have a line. The way I'm looking at this game is I will take Edmonton in this spot at anything -10 or better for Edmonton. So if you get like a -7, -8, -9, I'm jumping all over Edmonton's side of that line. If it's double digits, maybe I got to think about it for a little bit because it's not like Edmonton's lighting the world on fire. So that's the way I'm going to look at it. If it's double digits, maybe I think twice. If not, going to hammer and lay the points on Edmonton. There is no total, of course. I've got it capped at a high 40. So basically, if you get a number that starts with a 4, which I think you probably should, because you're talking about Logan Kilgore versus either Jonathan Jennings or Will Arndt, you're going to get a number that starts with a 4. I would say take the over on it because I do think they will at least get to 50 points because neither one of these defenses are playing very well either. So that's the way we're going to go with it. Edmonton wins the game straight up. We're going to take Edmonton anything -10 or better, or better than -10, I should say. And we're going to go over any number that begins with a 4. Now I'm going to take this opportunity, as I always do, to pump the tires of my great friends at Nerd Tees for the second time today because I recorded my NFL show earlier this afternoon. Nerdtees.ca. Use that promo code BWFinest. Save yourself 15% at checkout. Get free shipping in Canada on any order over $75. Or if you're in the US, 2 clicks of a button, everything is in US dollars for you, and you get an excellent conversion. Today's blend is Ontario Peaches, simply because it is the only blend that I have at home that is caffeine-free, and it's after 10 o'clock, and I refuse to ingest any caffeine this late in the night, or else I will not sleep at all, and I work at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. But it is delicious. Reminds me of summer, which now is apparently gone. Nerdtees.ca, promo code BWFinest. Save the 15%, get your free shipping, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love just in time for Christmas. You can do it at nerdtees.ca. Let's go to Toronto now, where the Argonauts are going to welcome the Saskatchewan Roughriders into town. Saskatchewan getting back on the happy side of par last time out. That was back in week 14 as the Riders are coming into this game off of their bye. They won a 2-point decision at home against Montreal back in week 14. A big fourth quarter comeback for the Riders. They didn't panic. They won that football game. And the big comeback kind of masks some lingering inconsistencies for this Riders team. Now, the plus side for Saskatchewan, nobody panicked. Again, nobody panicked. They all kept their cool. Cody Fajardo threw for 70%, 2 total touchdowns. William Powell, 94 yards rushing on 15 carries. He had a rushing touchdown. He also had a receiving touchdown. The secondary stayed really active. 7 pass knockdowns off of Vernon Adams in that game. Nobody panicked. They got down early, but they knew that we can come back from this. Like, just as Aaron Rodgers would say, relax. Now, they can't relax too much, because penalties are still an issue with this team. Again, they get up to double digits in penalties. They took 10 penalties for 87 penalty yards. And it's worth asking how many more times that's going to happen, and how many more times the good on this team, of which there is a lot, how many more times is the good going to bail them out from the underlying bad, which is those penalties, slow starts. Those can be killers, especially come playoff time when you don't get a second chance. The Argos back to their losing ways after briefly coming up on the positive side of a game. They're down to 2-10 now on the season. They lost a 23-16 decision at home against Calgary last week. They did outscore Calgary 13-3 in the second half of that game, but in the first half, the offense especially was barely awake. And it put them in a hole where even outscoring a team by 10 wasn't good enough to get them closer than 7 points. But, and this is the thing I disagree with this week, the absolute most of everything that has happened in the CFL this week, the Argos have benched McLeod Bethel Thompson, scapegoating him for the other problems on this team as if it's McLeod Bethel Thompson's fault that this team is 2-10. McLeod Bethel Thompson is the only quarterback on this roster that has thrown more touchdowns than interceptions. Yeah, the guy that's thrown for 3,000 yards and 19 touchdowns, sure, he's the problem. He gets benched in this game. Midway in the third quarter, James Franklin comes in, and look, Franklin threw for 75%. He threw for 147 pass yards in like a quarter and a half. He did really well. He even threw a touchdown pass. It's not about that. It's about Bethel Thompson has arguably been this team's best player for most of the season. And he gets benched as if he's the problem. He's the scapegoat for the fact that this Argos team can still only get James Wilder Jr. the ball 8 times a game. He takes the scapegoat for the fact that they took 10 penalties for 95 penalty yards and shot themselves in the foot. He takes the brunt of the fact that while the defense did generate 2 interceptions off of Bo Levi Mitchell, the slow start is what killed them. But it wasn't MBT's fault, and it hasn't been MBT's fault for the season as a whole. James Franklin isn't suddenly better than Bethel Thompson. And the fact that they're going to scapegoat him for the other problems that are on the team does not make the Toronto Argos a better football team on offense. So I don't think they're going to step to a team in Saskatchewan that's probably going to do some damage in the postseason. So I'm all about the Saskatchewan Roughriders in this football game. Realize the game's in Toronto, does not matter. I'm taking the Riders in Toronto to hang another loss on the Boatmen. Line in the game is set at Saskatchewan minus 6.5. Toronto 6.5 point dogs at home. But I'm going to lay those points, and I'm going to take Saskatchewan minus the 6.5 because it is exactly under a touchdown. And I think that is an accurate representation of how far apart these two teams are. It's about 10 points, but put the game in Toronto, give them an extra field goal. That to me is an accurate representation of the difference between these two teams. So I'm going to go with it. Let's lay the points, take the Riders minus the 6.5. Total in the game is set at 49. I've got this thing capped at like a low to mid 50. So I feel pretty darn good about this game going over. The Argos defense certainly has not fixed itself in the last week or two. So we're going to go over 49 points in Saskatchewan, Toronto. And the last game we're going to look at, the Montreal Alouettes traveling to BC to take on the Lions. Montreal coming up last week with what was arguably one of the greatest comebacks in CFL history. They come up with a 38-37 victory against Winnipeg in Montreal's home building. Adams had an incredible 488 yards passing, 5 touchdowns. He put on a show, and unfortunately it got overshadowed by what he did with Adam Big Hill's helmet. So if you haven't seen, Vernon Adams has been suspended for this week's game due to what happened between him and Adam Bighill. Adam Bighill started blocking him on an interception return. Adams yanked him to the ground by his face mask, pulled his helmet off in the process of doing so, and I think in trying to keep this like massive human in Adam Bighill. Adam Bighill's a big, thick dude, trying to keep him off of him. He makes a movement with the helmet like this, which they said was a dangerous motion because it was like he swiped at him. I don't know whether he hit him in the face or not. I can't tell that by the replay because there's someone literally standing right in front of it as it happens. Maybe it did hit him in the face. I'm not arguing the suspension, and neither is Vernon Adams. I think he understands he got too fired up on that play and did something stupid. He's taking his punishment. Matthew Schiltz has been announced as the Alouettes starting quarterback this week, foregoing Antonio Pipkin. And honestly, I can't blame them because most of Schiltz's metrics are better than Pipkin's. Really, the only area that I think Pipkin has the edge, other than CFL experience, is running the ball. Pipkin averages about 7.7 yards per carry. I'm okay with Schiltz getting the start. What I'm not okay with is the performance of William Stanback, and last week was just an absolute garbage performance. I think he had 2 yards on 5 carries, something ridiculous like that, and he only has 1 touchdown since week 5. Now, I realize he missed a few games, so there could be reason for that, but it's alarming to see how little field he had to work with last week in the run game. But of note for the Owls, Jake Weineke at wide receiver has a breakout game last week. 8 catches for $134 and his 5th touchdown on the season in the CFL this year. Don't look now, but he's like a sneaky underrated value source of touchdowns this year. 5 touchdowns, nothing to shake a stick at. Lions on a 2-game winning streak, obviously coming off of a 40-7 victory in Ottawa last week. They get to come home, which is good for them. Another day, another beating laid on the Red Blacks, outscoring Ottawa 69, nice, to 12 in those 2 games. Now, what can you glean from this? Obviously, they dominated them. They did have balanced scoring across all 4 quarters. 7 points, 13 points, 10 points, 10 points. So you can look at that as like, okay, balanced offensive attack. You had results in all 4 quarters, which is the kind of thing that coaching staffs absolutely love. But Mike Riley did somehow find a way to still throw an interception. The Lions averaged 496 yards of total offense in those 2 games against Ottawa, while Ottawa only averaged 286. Is this a defensive renaissance for the BC Lions, or is it just a shitty opponent? This is actually one of the tougher games for me to pick this week straight up, simply because, the Lions are on a 2-game win streak. I mean, they got it done in back-to-back games, and you still have to go out and get the job done. But I would need to see the Lions do something against a team that's better than nothing, at least on the offensive side of the ball. Like right now, the Red Blacks are a nothing offense. Montreal is certainly not a nothing offense, although without Vernon Adams, it's such a huge question mark. But I am actually going to take Montreal here. I think that team is good enough top to bottom to come up with the win. BC has to prove it to me that they can do it against somebody that's not Ottawa. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take Montreal here in what is an upset. When we talk about the betting line, it's really interesting. It's an upset. We're going to take Montreal in BC to beat the Lions. On the line here, Lions are 5-point favorites at home. That's way too much. That's just, I don't know what else to say. That's way too many points. I love Montreal +5 here. Even if you don't like Montreal to win, I think 5 points is more than enough to hedge your bets on a game like this. I don't think BC has done enough to prove that they are deserving of being a 5-point favorite over basically anybody that's not Ottawa. Total in the game set at 49 points, and I think I'm pretty much going to be on all the overs this week, depending on the number in Edmonton, Ottawa. I actually like the over in this one too. I got it capped at a low 50. It's enough for me to kind of lean, but I think I'm going to go with the over 49 points in Montreal, BC. Okay, folks, week 16 picks are now in the books. Let me go over them here with you one more time. I like the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at home to beat Hamilton, and I'm going to hammer Winnipeg -4.5 against the spread in a game that goes over the 48-point total. I like the Edmonton Eskimos on the road in Ottawa to beat the Red Blacks. Red Blacks have absolutely nothing left in the tank as far as I'm concerned. I like Edmonton at any number better than -10. And I like the game to go over any total that begins with a 4 because we don't have any lines yet. So keep an eye on the lines. I will update you in the comment section below on what my specific pick is when the line comes out. I like the Saskatchewan Roughriders on the road in Toronto to beat the Argos, and we're going to lay the points on Saskatchewan -6.5 in a game that goes over 49 points. And I like the Montreal Alouettes in BC to upset the Lions. We like Montreal +5 against the spread in a game that goes over 49 points. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for me. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the great folks at Nerd Tees and my love and passion for bringing you the content you know and hopefully love as much as I do. Thank you so much. Enjoy the games in week 16. The picks are in the books. See you again for week 17. Cheers.